Hey, Summer, how are you?
It's coming off mute too. Good to see you. Good to see everyone else who's on the line.
Me. And of course, we're all here early.
Yep, just ready for that recap.
Oh,
We've got Ben.
Hello.
hey, Ben.
How's everybody?
Doing pretty well. Joining you from my parents' lake house in Ohio. So
Very cool.
the joys of video conferencing.
Yeah. In a previous era, you would have just been able to avoid this meeting entirely, but
Or call into those conference call lines.
yeah, those were the
remember?
worst. Just the
Yeah.
worst.
And you had to like star to get talk to anyone.
Yep. So this is at least better than that. How is it there? Nice in Ohio today?
Yeah, 70s today
Yeah.
and tomorrow 40s. So, it's typical of spring.
Yeah.
Similar, very similar to Maryland, just a couple weeks behind in terms of where spring is. So it's a pretty cool time of year.
Michelle, what part of Ohio?
I'm from Cincinnati, and my parents have a little lake house about an hour and a half north in a little town called Eaton, Eaton, Ohio.
I'm from West Virginia. That's the reason why I asked.
Oh, yeah. Neat.
Parkersburg.
I drove right through there on my way here. I drive through there quite a bit. Hey, Heather.
Hey, everyone. Happy Monday and spring break for many.
Well, it looks like we're getting a bunch more people coming in now that we're at the top of the hour. So maybe we'll give folks about a minute to join and then jump into it. Cool. All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Teresa. Good to see you. Good to see everyone who's joined. I think we've got a good number of people on the line. We can go ahead and jump in, knowing that a few more will probably join. So with that in mind, we have our typical agenda. The one thing I'll say, I think everyone knows this is our last call for this group for this year's legislative session because the session has ended. We're going to hear all about what that means from Ben based on the work that he and Annette have done. But this will be the last meeting of this group for this purpose until we reconvene in the future. And so we'll do our typical welcome from Heather and Michelle, who are the co-chairs here. We'll have some really, really quick roll call and announcements, but there's not too much, and then jump straight into the bill review and recap of everything that's happened. So with that in mind, I will hand it over to Heather and Michelle.
Great. Well, I will just say good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be with you, and I hope you, at some point today, get a chance to step outside and enjoy the much anticipated sunshine because it is certainly brightening my day. And I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Yeah, hi, everyone. Great to see you all. I'm sitting outside, so apologies if you can kind of hear the birds in the background. But, one thing I'll add is that I think after we've done the bill review and addressed any questions, assuming we have some additional time, Heather and I are interested to hear, how you all felt about these calls and just some informal feedback about how things went this year. So feel free, if you have some of those reflections, feel free to jot them down because we're curious to hear about them later on. So thanks.
Perfect. Thank you both. And that's a great point by Michelle to get feedback so we can keep doing it better and better. For roll call, I took down a note of everyone who I saw was here of the voting members. There's 3 people I'll just check on to see if there's anyone on the line. Is anyone here from Senator Hester's office? Okay. Is anyone, let's see, is Dr. Lansing here? Don't think so, but just going once. And then is Dr. Range on the line? Also did not see Dr. Range. Okay, other than that, I think we've got everyone. And as usual, I always forget to say this, and usually Heather or Michelle will remind me, but I think I'll get it this time. If you don't mind putting your name and organization in the chat, just so we all have a feel for who's on the line, that would be great. We'll get it right on our last call. And with that, some quick announcements. We have our next full FSRC meeting this Thursday from 10 to noon. There was some confusion and a wrong calendar invite going around. So if you don't have it on your calendar, definitely check the FSRC website and you'll be able to find the latest information that you can pull over. Then we've got our upcoming committee meetings. So distribution and access will be on the 24th, environment and production, May 8th. And then the communication and coordination committee will be meeting again, not to discuss, legislative debrief stuff, of course, but to do some coordination for the local food councils. So we're excited about that. And now it's time when I turn it over to you, Ben. So I will stop presenting so that you can do so. And thank you, everyone, for putting your information in the chat. It's really helpful.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to pull up the slideshow. Good to be with you on our last call here. Basically, today's task is pretty simple. I'm going to go through the bills that did make it across the finish line, big and small, and then we'll quickly cover the ones that didn't make it for one reason or another. Everything is updated in our tracking sheet, which we've linked to here. One just general note about the General Assembly. Most bills that make it to the governor's desk, somewhere probably in the range of 99%, are either signed by the governor or he allows them to go into law without his signature. There are very rare policy-related vetoes. Some vetoes are for procedural reasons, like it's duplicative language. But you can pretty safely assume that if a bill is headed to the governor's desk, even if he hasn't signed it yet, that it will be signed, just based on past experiences. So what made it across the finish line? I will go through the FSRC Council Bill, Definitions and Reports Bill. This was the one that changed the definitions in the Authorizing Act for the FSRC to healthy food priority areas versus food deserts. Changed the definition of wasted food. And it was also amended through the legislative process to, I guess, demand might be the wrong word, but to task the FSRC with developing policy recommendations on improving the food system in urban, suburban, rural settings, increasing the quality, quantity, aggregate, marketing and distribution of local food, increasing the procurement of local food through schools and institutions of higher education, creating additional market opportunities and expanding access to small manufacturing and food production infrastructure. So that is the FSRC bill. It started as simply a definitions bill, got amended toward the end to add those different areas that the FSRC is going to be tasked with. The procurement bill from the State Department of Education. So as amended, this bill requires the Department of Education in coordination with General Services and the Department of Agriculture to develop a program when funding is available to procure local food for local schools. So local food is defined in 3 ways under this bill. If it's from a local farm, and the definition of a local farm can be found under the existing Certified Local Farm and Fish program. Second, if it is a Chesapeake Bay invasive species like catfish, or third, if it is food grown within 250 miles of a school. And preference in the bill is given to these first 2 categories. It also increases from 5% to 10% the Board of Public Works preference for procuring food from local sources. So that should at least incentivize a little bit more procurement of local food. Finally, it requires the MDSC to develop a centralized platform to facilitate this program. And he got one no vote in the House on the first go around, but this pretty much passed almost unanimously as it went through. A couple changes to the Maryland Farms and Families Fund. So this fund, which was previously a grant program where money would go to nonprofits, and the nonprofits would administer this program. The program is now going to be more of a match program. So purchases made at participating farmers markets using federal nutrition programs like SNAP and WIC will be matched. And like I said, this is a change from the previous iteration of the Maryland Farms and Families Fund program. The bill allows match expenditures to provide education on federal nutrition programs at participating farmers markets. It also expands the eligible recipients of these funds, since this is being geared away from the nonprofit sector. And that includes an expanded definition of the word person in terms of people who are qualified to participate in the Farms and Families Fund program. I'm not exactly sure mechanically how this is going to work in practice. I'm sure there are subject matter experts on the call, but this is the change that they've made to the Maryland Farms and Families Fund. And no real significant opposition to this one either. A naming bill from the Department of Agriculture makes some changes to the Maryland Agricultural Commission and Young Farmers. So in terms of the commission, they changed required representation, removed from the commission somebody representing the nursery industry, dairy, poultry, services related to agriculture, and tobacco. In their stead, replacing those are somebody from controlled environmental agriculture industry, socially disadvantaged farmers, veteran farmers, the newly established Committee on Young Farmers, more on that in a moment, urban and small farmers, and beginning farmers. In terms of the Committee on Young Farmers, there is this existing body called the Young Farmers Advisory Board that's being replaced with the Committee on Young Farmers. That committee is tasked with communicating the importance of young and beginning farmers to state agricultural, addressing issues relating to young and beginning farmers in the state, and to hold quarterly meetings. And then there are requirements for the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation Board that seem pretty technical in nature that were added at the end in uncodified language. So no real opposition to this one either. Oyster shucking, I think we covered this one briefly, but this bill increases the amount of funds the Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation can provide for seasonal full-time jobs that are projected to be created or retained. Previously, it would fund up to $10,000. That's been increased up to $25,000. It also has reduced the time a person must be a licensed food dealer to participate in this program from 5 years to 3 years to be eligible to receive funding. A scattering of no votes in the House, just probably because this bill did have a bit of a fiscal note, but passed unanimously in the Senate. A baby food labeling bill. This simply changes labeling requirements for baby food products. Previously, it had to be labeled if there was a toxic heavy metal in the baby food. That requirement has been changed to now list a toxic element so that it's not only limited to those heavy metals. And then there's also language that was added in the amendment process requiring baby food sold in Maryland to have a QR code if there are toxic elements so that people can do their research on exactly what those elements are. Chesapeake Bay Legacy Act. This is a very large environmental policy bill relating to the Chesapeake Bay. Only a few aspects of it are relevant to food systems. So I'm going to go over those briefly, and then I'll mention some other changes in case people are interested in doing their own research on this. So the big one is that this establishes the Maryland Leaders in Environmentally Engaged Farming LEAF program to develop and promote conservation of wildlife and pollinator habitats, the reduction of nutrient input, the use of natural filters, healthy soil practices, facilitating outreach and experience in agriculture to underserved communities, partnering with food banks, using renewable energy and assisting new farmers. This bill requires the governor to appropriate $900,000 per fiscal year on this program. That came down in the amendment process. It started at about 1.2 million, and it was brought down to 900,000. Separately, the bill establishes a water quality monitoring program to provide a consistent statewide approach for improving water quality monitoring data, long and short-term water quality monitoring assessments to guide programs meant to meet water quality goals, integrate monitoring data and planning processes, and provide the public with readily available monitoring data. So those are the two really relevant portions of the bill for our purposes. There are other changes in state law. If you're interested in regenerative practices and traditions, which I'm sure some of you are, especially our agricultural folks, and healthy soils, that's in there. Finfish harvested and processed by Ikejime, which I have no idea what that means, but I'm sure it's important. Fishery management plans, aquaculture leases, whole watershed restoration partnership, water quality training, stream and floodplain restoration project requirements. This bill was a little bit controversial in the House. It was more of a party line vote just because of the price tag, but it did pass unanimously in the Senate. Bill on the Federal Commodity Supplemental Food Program. So this bill requires the Family Investment Administration within the Department of Human Services, and for DHS to be the central coordinating and directing agency of all public assistance programs in the state, including food stamps and Federal Commodity Supplemental Food Program. The program was previously housed in the Department of Aging. So this just moves it over to the Department of Human Services, passed unanimously in both chambers. A bill that only applies to Anne Arundel County. This authorizes a governing body in Anne Arundel County, whether that's the county itself or a municipality within the county, to grant a property tax credit against the personal property tax imposed on the property of a supermarket that completes construction and is located in a food desert retail intensive area. It also requires the relevant governing body, whether that's the county council or the municipalities, to designate what counts as a food desert under this bill. So notice they use the outdated language that was that we've moved away from in our FSRC definitions. This passed nearly unanimously. Again, it only applies to Anne Arundel County. It's not a requirement that any county or municipality in Anne Arundel County offer that tax credit. It simply authorizes them to do so. Family Investment Program. This one got significantly amended during the legislative process. As amended, the bill phases in a requirement starting in fiscal year 2028 that all child support received in a month pass through to a family seeking assistance under the Family Investment Program. Then by 2031, fiscal year 2021, the state government will be prohibited from considering child support income and computing the amount of assistance received. So the phase-in was for cost-saving purposes, because this is going to expand eligibility if you're including child support. If you're not including child support income as income, more people are going to qualify. So they changed it to phase-in starting in fiscal year 2028. And this one passed on a party line vote, I think, just because of the imposed cost in future years. Hunger Free Campus Grant Program. So the Hunger Free Campus Grant Program previously only applied to public institutions. Under this bill, which passed, any private campus, any 2 to 4 year institution of higher education that meets the necessary requirements is eligible to participate and declare itself a hunger-free campus. The catch is that the governor is allowed to appropriate $100,000 each fiscal year for this program. Private institutions are not eligible to receive that funding. So they can be hunger-free campus programs, but they are not eligible for grants under the program. Interestingly, this passed unanimously in the Senate, but pretty much a party line vote in the House. So those are the bills that made it past the finish line. I'm going to quickly go over some of the bills that did not pass. This is a pretty large list here. I'm just going to highlight a few of them that I think would be of interest to all of you. Again, the way the General Assembly works, just because your bill didn't pass this year doesn't mean it's not going to pass next year. Sometimes it takes a couple of bites at the apple, so the effort always continues. The On-Farm Organics and Wasted Food Reduction Program, which was originally going to have this sewage fee They got rid of the sewage fee. The program was going to be funded through general funds, made it through the House, but the Senate did not take it up. So there's no on-farm organics and wasted food reduction and diversion grant program. The food, forest, and foraging bill, waste disposal fee. I'm sorry, I said sewage fee, I meant waste disposal fee. Thank you so much, Shannon. Food, forests, and foraging program that we talked about early in the session didn't advance. Changes to the cottage food products industry that would have made it easier to sell cottage food products and instituted a consistent regulatory regime. That did not advance. I know a lot of people were interested in the expansion of the community eligibility provision program. That bill did not pass. Judging from what happened at the hearings, I think this was just a cost thing, considering the fiscal constraints of this session. But I know something that that's something that people are going to follow in future years. Direct-to-consumer sale of raw milk for human consumption, putting a regulatory regime in for that. That did not make it across the finish line. No tax for sugary beverage distributors. That was not included in the final budget proposal. The Maryland Higher Education Commission bill that would have included a checkbox on the Maryland college aid processing system passed the House, but it did not make it out of the Senate. So this would have added a question on the college aid processing system about food insecurity. Like I said, passed the House on a party line vote, but never made it out of committee in the Senate. And then finally, House Bill 1434, which we were following closely. As amended, this bill would have tasked FSRC with doing a healthy food priority area study. It did end up passing the House, but did not make it out of the Senate, and the Senate never considered that bill. Once again, these are bills that were withdrawn a while ago, but just to refresh everybody's memory, on-farm home processing license, a change to food and milk product labeling, and the alcoholic beverages bill to sell alcoholic beverages in chain stores and supermarkets. Also never made it through the legislative process. Quickly on the budget, this has been in the news a lot, but just doing my best to kind of summarize where things ended up. General Assembly agreed on a compromise budget and Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. All in all, there are about $2 billion in cuts in spending. Some of the cuts are one-time transfers from special funds, including the Transportation Trust Fund. Some of the cuts people have been concerned about, I know people on this call mentioned somatic. Those were restored during the legislative process. Proposed cuts to the Developmental Disabilities Administration were also restored. The one thing, I know there are folks on the call interested in land preservation. There was a transfer from a few different special land preservation funds amounting to $25 million that was put back in the general fund to help close this budget deficit. In terms of the revenue side, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act imposed some additional cost-sharing requirements on counties related to teacher pensions and settlements for false imprisonment. There are revenue raisers in the bill, just mentioning a few here, a couple new higher income tax brackets for people making above $500,000 and $1 million. The 6% tax on vending machine purchases went through, increased fees on the purchase of cannabis, and sports gambling as well also made it. So long story short, at the end of this process, at least according to our initial projections, we turned a more than $3 billion deficit into a fiscal year 2026 surplus at $300 million. That is just according to estimates. Obviously, things change. There's a lot of uncertainty at the federal level, but those are the latest estimates based on the enactment of this bill. Rainy Day Fund, the recommendation is that it stay at about 8% of the general fund. That's a recommendation from the Spending Affordability Commission, but that actually was increased to 9% of the general fund. So we're above the recommended level for the Rainy Day Fund. That is it for me. I want to give just some very brief thank yous. I couldn't have done this without Annette Hallberg, who's on the call, who was extremely diligent in putting together these slide decks, which is not easy. It's a weekly job. She did a phenomenal job. She filled in for me when I couldn't do it. So major round of applause for Annette. Braden Shuck, who's not on the call, also one of our externs, was terrific in making sure that our spreadsheet was updated. Major thanks to Michelle and Heather for being our great co-chairs. And I know Annika is still out on maternity leave, but Summer did an amazing job with all the logistics. And with that, I will finally stop talking. Thanks, everybody.
Well, I am just going to turn that appreciation right back around to you, Ben, because you have brought incredible expertise and reliability and dependability to our conversations every week. And this is not a small amount of work or a small amount of time, and we truly couldn't have done it without you. So I echo the appreciation that you shared, but really want to shower it back on you too, because I learned a lot from you, and you were incredibly patient with all of our questions. So thank you so much for all that. So I know Michelle and I had hoped to engage everyone in some discussion reflecting on the past session. But before we do that, I think we can invite any questions for Ben about the presentation, any reflections, updates, flags for things that we missed. Feel free to raise your hand, use the chat box, or just go off mute. All right.
I did see Teresa's question in the chat about the presentation being made available after this, and I believe that it will be sent out, Teresa. So thank you.
Yes, just sent it to Summer. I know Summer sends it out as a recap after all these meetings. So, yep.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was excellent. Trying to take notes so quickly, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Lindsay, I see your question about legislation we expect to return in 2026. I think a lot of this will return in 2026. The prospects, especially on things like CEP, really depend on the fiscal situation. It's nice that we were able to close our fiscal year 2026 deficit without either raising income taxes for most people, raising property taxes, nor were there cuts to vital programs. There are no cuts to health programs, Medicaid, et cetera, or any state cuts to food benefits. But yeah, I think it just depends on the fiscal situation. If we're in a better fiscal situation, some of these bills where you have larger price tags might have a better chance of making it through. It's also an election year for the General Assembly. So I don't know how much that changes everything, but it's certainly a consideration.
And I would just note as well, if there are particular bills specifically that you're wondering about, I know that a lot of the General Assembly members will put out an end of session recap with what went well. And I know I've seen from a few of them already that they're like, okay, I'll just bring this back next year. So I think that's obviously not a firm commitment, but I think looking at the legislators' end of session wrap-ups are helpful just for seeing where they plan to circle back next year.
Jenna, I saw your question in the chat. The answer to that is yes. It originally applied to SNAP and FIP, but they took the SNAP portion out of the bill.
And Ben, I saw a clarification from Shannon related to from MDE about how it is a waste disposal fee, not a sewage fee.
Yeah, that was my bad.
So just wanted to make sure we saw that part. So thank you for that, Shannon. Great. Other questions, additions?
If I could just commend Ben and his colleague, great job covering so many different subject areas. I don't know how you do it.
Caffeine, mostly. Thanks so much, Steve.
Sure.
Great. And I saw a comment from LaMonica Jones about SB 789. LaMonica, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, unless something changed, I believe Senator Washington's bill appropriated $150,000. It kept the dollar amount the same for Hunger Free Campus.
You are correct. I just checked. I put 100,000 in the slides, but it is 150,000. So I'm double checking the revised fiscal note. And yeah, 150,000 is still in the bill. So our apologies, but yes, it is 150,000, not 100,000. Thanks.
And Ben, just to clarify, thanks so much for that, LaMonica. Does it actually actively appropriate those funds this year, or it just enables the appropriation of it? Should that?
I believe it. Hold on, just one second. Yeah, it only authorizes the governor to spend it, so it's not a shall appropriate. It's appropriate. It's a may appropriate.
Okay. And was there money, or just in the future there may be?
There's no money in the initial bill. It is only authorizing in future fiscal years for the governor to include it in the annual budget bill.
Got it. Thanks, Ben. And I see a question from Nancy.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the General Assembly did try and take all of this under consideration. They had updated revenue estimates that tried to estimate the impact of federal job cuts and kind of all of the chaos we're seeing from Washington. That led the governor to introduce supplemental budgets, which assumed a higher budget deficit based on those problems. It's one of those things that's really, really hard to estimate. There are just so many downstream impacts. If so many federal employees lose their jobs, how is that going to affect businesses? How is that going to affect tax revenue? So they did take that into consideration, but it's just an estimate. They estimated that it would cost the state about $300 to $500 million, along with the existing budget deficit, and that's included. That assumption is included in the budget bill that ended up passing. It also includes, they found out just before the budget bill was enacted, a series of cuts to public schools coming from the federal Department of Education, which as of 1:30 today still exists. And they included those cuts, making up for those cuts in the last pass of the budget.
Ben, Diana, did it include anything around Medicaid and Social Security?
So it didn't include anything on Social Security. On Medicaid, it includes triggers. This came over from the Senate side. So I'm not 100% sure exactly how the triggers work, but generally, if there are federal Medicaid cuts, the state will make up those costs, and additional cuts to the general fund to compensate for those costs will be triggered. I'm not entirely sure exactly which general funds would be cut. It could just be, it's up to the General Assembly to decide in the next legislative session. So if Maryland loses $500 million in Medicaid funding from the federal government, just as an example, then we would appropriate that money to make up for the loss of federal Medicaid money, but then we'd have a $500 million hole in the state budget once we get back into the budgeting cycle. That's my understanding of how that works.
Anne.
Yeah, so I think what that trigger is, not I think, this is a very high level understanding of it, is that once we hit $1 billion in all federal funding cuts, that Board of Public Works, I believe, has to loop in the General Assembly into a conversation about what to do about it. So like they really watered down from like what an actual trigger, what we think of as a trigger, and much more of like a, let's start the conversation about it, even though that probably would have happened anyway. That's my understanding of it, that it's much more watered down, but anyone else jump in if they have more information on that.
I'm glad you brought that, Anne. That is a much more sophisticated understanding than my own. It does remind me, though, that they did appoint they appointed a bipartisan group of legislators to be kind of an advisory board to the Board of Public Works. If I guess no matter what, but if there is that $1 billion in cuts to state funding. Thank you so much, Anne.
And I see a really positive article in the chat that Lindsay posted. So for those who haven't seen it, feel free to review. I was explaining that to my parents while I was here in Ohio today. Any other questions or comments or points of clarification? Heather, anything you want to add before we jump into more of a discussion, or try to, about these calls and how they functioned this year?
No, I think just it's a perfect transition time for us to be thinking about what is our unique role, both as an FSRC specifically, this body, but also our community partners who engage in these conversations. And so I think feedback on anything and everything is welcome in terms of these meetings specifically, but just what information has been helpful to you, what have you been missing? So I think both the content questions, but then also, your observations on our role in all of these statewide discussions, because legislation is only shaped and created successfully if those who are impacted are involved and have a voice in the process. And so that is really our goal here. And I'm looking forward to your feedback on how we can facilitate that most effectively, recognizing, resources are always ebbing and flowing. And so we want to do what we can with the tools that we have available next year. So Michelle, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks. And Ben, maybe if folks could jot down your email if they need it real quick, and then if you don't mind stopping the share, just in case folks want to come off video for more of a discussion. I see a hand already. Thanks, Allie. Go ahead.
So I am the community prevention team manager for the MDH Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Control. So a big upstream focus for us is food security and healthy nutrition to really combat and prevent chronic diseases throughout the state. I honestly not able to remember how we got in contact, but Annika did a really great job of connecting me with a lot of different people in this group and elsewhere to basically, coordinate and kind of just get better about getting out of our silos. So I just want to say, like, this type of meeting for me was super helpful to find out what was going on legislatively that not only affected me, but also people that I may partner with. Also gave me a better idea of kind of what's going on out there in the ag world and basically everything that's not necessarily like chronic disease food related. So I just wanted to say I really enjoyed it. It was good to know and hear the summaries and get an idea of what was going on and help me to be able to pass it to my team. Our legislative person obviously was super focused on other topics, and it helped me to be able to kind of keep us in the loop and not overburden her with things that might not necessarily be like quote unquote chronic disease focused. So thank you guys. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Allie. Speaking as a chronic disease public health person, that's my background as well. Yeah, I appreciate that you were able to join the conversation this year and share your perspective at times too. So thanks so much for being here. Do any folks have other thoughts, maybe some positives or things that, assuming these calls continue, they want to make sure that we continue doing. I think I'll just jump I don't necessarily need to be the facilitator and also the sharer. And Diana, I saw your hand, but I'll just say that I think one of the huge value adds is, the work that Ben and his team are able to do to track everything and watch the hearings and get a sense of the, questions that are raised and some of the points of clarification that are sometimes at first pretty confusing when we're seeing multiple bills that might be similar. So, just with all of the time and effort that takes, I think that is a huge value add to the educational components of these calls. So again, not to overstate the thank yous, but, I just really feel like that was that was of huge value to this group. So thanks again, Ben. And I will pass it to Diana.
Michelle, I was going to say something similar to what you just said. I don't think these meetings would be productive if it was not for Ben and his team. I'm not a big person that would take time reading the bills and understanding them, but every time I come to this meeting, I walk away with a very clear understanding, and I feel like I'm informed and know how to come back and advocate on whatever way that I need to advocate. So I don't want to continue the thank yous, but in regards to this meeting and it happening, it has educated me, and it's educated me. It's made it simple to be educated. And I know that it's not that way. I know it's very intense, but your presentation seems so smooth and it's so understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks a lot.
Do folks, you're welcome to continue sharing the things that you valued about these calls, but if folks have any thoughts about ways that these calls could be improved or things that the Food System Resiliency Council should consider when thinking about allocating resources, because we're all here, we're all, volunteering our time or taking time out of our normal day-to-day to be here. So are there ways that we can use this time more wisely for folks that want to engage in these ways?
And I'll just add on as a possible consideration for feedback is the frequency. Do you feel like need to meet every week is there, or would potentially just be, meeting every other week be sufficient? Because I know a lot of this is time sensitive, but we also really want to, be mindful of your time every week too.
I know that question wasn't intended for me, but I'll kick it off because I think it's a good one. I'm curious for what other people think, but I think we noticed probably towards the end of session that there wasn't that much happening or changing on a week-to-week basis. So maybe it's even something like in the beginning when there's tons of bills being introduced, like it's very helpful to have it on a weekly basis. And the other thing that seems important from like a timing perspective is knowing once hearing dates are announced, maybe if we weren't meeting on a weekly basis for this entire time, we could at least make sure we were sending out notifications of like, hey, this meeting is coming up. Here's the deadline to sign up if you want to submit testimony, so that if we're not meeting every week, we still let people know if there's bills where we know there's specific interest in potentially testifying. But curious for what others think.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Well, I am not a member, but we at COG, either Sydney or I, and sometimes Steve, always try to have at least one of us listen in. I don't think they have to be weekly, but and I really loved Summer's comments. I think though, maybe there's just like a couple things that have to be on the calendar, or would be strongly recommended to be on the calendar, like budget introduction, for instance. Making sure that there is a meeting that's tied with that. Maybe 2 meetings. But But yeah, thank you. Thank you for these really informative calls. It helps us do our job better.
I want to mention one idea that was Annette's actually, which I think is a good one, is on our spreadsheet, having a separate tab that has definitions for some of the jargon that you hear about the General Assembly. I think it can get very confusing. And so I think that's something that we would try to incorporate next year. I get confused and I follow this stuff for a living. So what's the difference between a late over bill and a special order? And then we'd also put on that things like how many days in advance do you need to submit testimony? So that could all be in one document. I think that's something we could try and do next year.
Thank you, Lindsay and Ben, for your comments. Thank you, Taylor, for your comment in the chat. Appreciate that. On the theme of jargon, I think something that I try to keep in mind is, since we are such a we represent multiple sectors while we're here on the call, I try at times as a facilitator to, if acronyms are being used that may not be familiar to everyone on the call, to try to explain them. And so it's maybe something that we could announce more frequently in the future, given, you know, we're coming at this work from a variety of different backgrounds and perspectives, which is, I think, a lot of the strength of these calls, as folks have mentioned. But I appreciate you recognizing that same thing, Ben, with the General Assembly jargon and specific language related to that process. We don't need to belabor the feedback if folks don't have additional comments, but know that we're open to it. And hopefully you have our email addresses, or you can email Summer and the Food System Resiliency Council team to, you know, share anything that maybe you don't want to share on this call right now, or ideas that come to you in the future. We really, whether or not you're an appointed member, by the way, I wanted to clarify that. We really welcome all feedback, as these calls are meant to educate all of us doing this work, or members of the public who are interested. So I'll pause there just in case anyone else wants to add something. Okay, Heather, anything you want to say to close us out before we turn it over to maybe Annika as the final person? Or not Annika, Summer.
I was like, we'll be waiting a while. Okay.
That was like an end of season review. Annika was here the whole time. No.
I wish.
Well, it can certainly not have to be, you know, this isn't the only opportunity for providing feedback like others have shared. So, you know, we are eager to hear your thoughts today or anytime in the future in advance of next year's session. I also would say we have a lot of conversations about how to engage a variety of perspectives and community partners in this format. And also, you know, how can we support the work of community partners as well? So be a two-way conduit of information and education, I think, to the extent that a state group like ours can do that. So in addition, it was great to hear from agency partners and regional government coordinators today, but for those of you who actively engage in advocacy related to specific bills, if you work with legislators, if you have other ideas about, you know, how we can help share information or gather feedback to inform what we share during our calls, I think we would welcome thoughts on how to facilitate that that pipeline of input, because it's pretty rapid and we do what we can to reach out between meetings. But I think sometimes the turnaround is so quick that if we can be proactively receiving information, we can help connect that to these discussions too. So you know, just welcome your thoughts on that. And I think the only thing that I would just share is appreciation to all of you for your partnership in this work. And I think, you know, Ben, Summer, Annette, and Michelle and I spend every Friday afternoon connecting in advance of these meetings. And that's one of my favorite highlights of ending the week, just to get to connect with folks with a wide variety of perspectives on these topics, both personal and professional. And I think there's really great conversations that happen because of this work. And so I will miss that. And also I'm glad that everybody will get a couple hours back each week, at least for the next 6 to 7 months. And thank you, Michelle, for being such a wonderful co-pilot in all of this work.
And thank you, Heather. And thank you, everyone, for being here and spending your Mondays with us. So I think I'll turn it back over to Summer to say bye.
Exactly. Yeah, nothing to add, really. What an uplifting way for all of us to spend our Monday afternoon, just appreciating everyone who's a part of these calls. But these have been great. And like Michelle and Heather said, this is not the only opportunity for feedback. Please do reach out if you have feedback or questions. I'll share the slides with everyone in the follow-up, and we'll talk to you soon, although maybe not at this exact time next week. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate you. Take care.
Bye, all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.